Yeah, well, maybe we should just mention, going to give it one more minute, but as you saw in the message that went out today, we're going to offer more space for discussion and questions. And we very much hope that you guys will jump in and help make that happen. And I think Tapis is going to kick us off now.
Yeah, I'm actually, because I know that today we should have a really good mix of people from different backgrounds in writing, many different experience levels as well. So I'm hoping that, you know, with your guys' input, with your questions, the comments, that we actually have a very, very good and hopefully frank discussion about screenwriting and essay. And also just the, you know, some ideas about the calling. You know, most of us here, the want to be a screenwriter came before the money, if that makes any sense. And just why was that the case? Why did we feel that we had this mad passion to tell stories and to make films and series that speak to what we believe in? So I'm looking forward to seeing some questions. Maybe you haven't had that. You haven't had the calling just yet and you're searching for it. And that's something that is a big question in your life. And I think that speaking about it and, you know, engaging with it goes a long way to helping answering that question instead of leaving it up to yourself to answer. But we'll get onto that. I think it's about time we get started. It's now 4:06. I know a lot of people are going to keep jumping in. We'll catch them up as quickly as we can. But I just want to thank everyone who's here. I really appreciate you guys coming through. It's now probably the 5th or the 6th session now, which is great. We've covered a lot of technical aspects of screenwriting. And when I say technical, it's more along the lines of discussing them and leaving them to everyone who's participating to try to figure out on their own. Maybe it improved their writing. Maybe it asked new questions they never thought was possible in writing itself. So we thought that today would be a great day to actually just touch base with the community, because this is a community now. Thankfully to you guys, it is a community now. We are basically doing something that was just an idea, a thought that Gavin came to me with, that I think it was a couple of months ago. You know, this whole idea of having a fostering a community of writers, and, you know, really just helping each other, being voices for each other, and actually, you know, I won't say agony aunts, but just hearing each other in terms of our journeys, our specific wants and needs in what we want to do in terms of storytelling. So I'm going to start that off actually with Gavin. I'd like maybe for you to tussle with this idea that we've had a couple of people here that have been here for multiple weeks, and they're all coming, you know, wanting to learn how to write, wanting to be writers. But how important is it to be a part of a community as part of your journey? I mean, I'm guessing that you didn't get started alone when you were starting your storytelling journey, or was it the case that that was what was happening?
Most, let me do a two-prong answer there, because I'll answer that question, but then maybe go back to you know, one reason why I wanted to do this, and that overall question of, you know, what, you know, why I felt a calling to be a screenwriter, or what that means. You know, we did discuss a little bit about what it is, but that, you know, why did I feel called, or the why behind it was part of our focus for this one. So when I kind of had a sense from quite a young age, when I was about 12, that I felt the world was quite insane, and I wanted to kind of be part of the discussion of how do we do better. And I realized I loved books, realized not many people read, relatively speaking. And I also loved movies, and I realized lots of people like to watch those things. And so I figured movies would be the way to go. And that was kind of in my heart, but I never really even admitted it to myself, like, as like, this is what I'm going to do. Because, you know, you got to get those questions in school, like, what you going to do, what you going to do. And I didn't know anyone in film. There was no film industry really at the time in South Africa. I was in Joburg. You know, it seemed like a crazy thing to admit, and go, well, one day that will happen, because there was no path. I did meet a friend when I was about 18. It was also like a film nut, and you know, between us, we watched everything. I mean, that was the time when I still was watching movies, and I spent all my time, basically, either reading or watching movies. And our passion fed off one another. So we'd talk about what we would do. We'd talk about all the films we loved, and we'd talk about, like, okay, well, let's think of a scene, let's think of a story. And we enjoyed that, and we felt that ours was good ideas as we'd come across, and that mutual enthusiasm did sort of reinforce things and make it feel more like, really, it kept mirroring to me that I do want to do this. That this does sound like fun and the way I want to go. And then I also had this thing, well, if I'm going to do that, then and if I do actually want to shift things, then I have to understand which way they should be shifted. So, studying everything, studying economics and religion and philosophy and politics and everything, to try and build a coherent model of reality that, because a story is essentially a model of reality. And if you don't know how the pieces work together, if you don't know psychology, and if you don't know how business works or whatever, it'll be hard to tell stories, and but then there's this leap that once you go down an academic route, that you have to redo, because a story isn't an argument, and a story isn't an intellectual thing. It's entertainment, and it's fun, and it's an emotional medium. And to get back out of the head was, quite a path as well. But for me, it did come down to that fact that I really, and it also evolves a lot. But in retrospect, I did realize that the stories we tell ourselves does kind of determine the society we create. That we think in stories. So if we can't, tell a different story, we can't come up with a different society. If we can't tell different relationship stories, if we can't imagine a different way it can flow, then it's very unlikely that we're going to live it. And it's interesting how the world works, because your idea is one thing, but also your ideas come from what you experience outside. And if you haven't had a different relationship from the normal thing, then it's going to be hard to tell a story about one. It's so there is this thing, and somehow I feel like life does put in the pieces that over time has helped me to do both. So I've just had a very unique relationship that was amazing for me and amazing for her, and yet still we broke up because our paths were just different. But we had something great, and it showed me a different way of being in relationship, but probably would never be able to come up with a different way if I hadn't experienced it, and probably couldn't have lived it if I also wasn't different in other ways. So life has this little back and forward. So my simple why is that my life put me there. It was a desire in me, and it unfolded on the external as I pursued it. And I think, like, when you chase a dream, it's hard going at first, and yet there is some synchronicity, like it's challenge after challenge. But if it's true, then breaks do come, and if you stick with it, it comes. And at the same time, I guess the more important to you, or the deeper the calling, the more the challenges will be there, because inertia is a thing, and moving through it requires a lot of energy. So that answer the question. So can I bounce to you now?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely speaks to definitely one kind of journey that's ends up being what storytellers go through, and that's once you've discovered it, once it comes into your path, and once you put your mind to it, something happens. It's not an easy journey at all, especially in a place like SA, because we generally have a lot of people who want to tell a story, but in ways in which they build a career or they have income and so forth is a divergent thing. Some people work in TV, some people work in advertising, some people work through the indie funding way of doing things, where you work in a completely different thing that isn't directly related to creating films and TV, fund your own craft, and then you're able to make your own films and your own television. And it really does play itself to, having a divergency in South Africa, whereas there's, very rigid, well, when I say rigid, very defined paths to becoming a storyteller in the States, for example. But that's the beauty of it here, I suppose. It's this idea that, like you've mentioned in your journey, that things fell into place, and that's a beautiful thing. From my side, it was, it still is a fight, and when I would say fight, it's like a tooth and nail struggle, and it's mainly because of how I got into it. I grew up with film before I knew books. My dad was a big film lover, he still is, and it's how I came into film, because I fondly remember seeing my very first films before I ever read my very first books. So there's this connection I have to it that's primordial, that is also very much my comfort place as well. I feel at home when I'm in a cinema watching a film on the screen, which is much larger than me. I also feel at home with expressing a story that's cinematic. For a while I was writing, short stories and even one or two books, but that never worked out because I was always trying to write a film in those formats. So how it came to me was I had to drop everything and jump into it, and then from there figure everything else out. It was a hell of a risk. My family helped me a hell of a lot. I'm not here without them, plain and simple. And I'm still working on trying to create the entrepreneurial side of it, because that's how I envision, it making its work for me, as a business or as an income or even as anything. I mean, it's I want to be able to write my own films that I direct. I want to be able to direct other films that have been written by other great writers. But it's very much a case that I've chosen this particular path. Now I know a lot of people who are listening to this right now have built careers off TV, built careers of being broadcast writers, and really they found a comfort in having that monthly salary come through this form of storytelling. But they feel frustrated that they've not been able to tell their own stories, if that makes any sense, that their stories have been delineated to them by platform, by broadcast, by the SABC or your Mnets of this world. And I think some of them are right now looking to film as being a way in which they could tell their own stories. And I think that's something that we'll obviously talk about over here. But I think that if you're planning on making a film because you want to make money, or you're planning on making film as a form of escape from the humdrum of life, trying to tell your own story, it often doesn't work that way. It's something that's a lot deeper than that. I found to be the case that whenever I've put a financial gain above me actually having a real voice in telling a particular script that's going to go into production, that it comes off as insincere, and I have to work 10 times harder to get it right. And I think in this particular case, there are some people who have built up this amazing career in TV, and they want to create their own stories, but they want to throw away the experience they have in TV to make their own films. When the answer's right there, find the funds together, make a pilot episode, sell it, and create your own television show, right? So I want to actually be able to engage with the community about this. And really it's a case of, we're not trying to present, new ways of writing and so forth, but helping you understand that we're all storytellers, but we all make the journey in our own way. And what works for you might not work for anyone else, but it's maybe because you have a family, you need to have a reliable source of income. But it's through that challenge that you're actually able to create works that might speak to you. And I think that's probably the reason why I really thought that today would be a great day to hear back from the community, because I think that each and every person here has a unique journey. I mean, we've got people who used to be photographers, we've got people who are still working in radio and they want to create TV shows. So that's a major reason why I think that today is really important. I don't think I had a question, it was just more of a comment. But I don't know if you want to add to that, Gavin.
Well, you did remind me of a few things I did want to actually speak to. So also just to share in terms of my own journey, there's something just innate in terms of, I think, destiny, in terms of, that calling. So I remember when I was 6, literally watching an SABC and wondering and like really, really passionate about it. Like, who's making this shit? It's like, I could do better than this. I was seeing as 6 and going, I can do better than this. Like, why is it this bad? And I did also just want to clarify, because in the sense of this journey doesn't end. There's no like I've made it now journey. And in South Africa, that place of just getting to write and do what you want to do is almost impossible to arrive at. And I finally got to the place where I've got a partner who's a proper producer, who's got the connections, who appreciates my voice and trusts it, and I can just be free in what I'm doing. And often he'll come with the project, but I'm free to do what I want to do within it. But we haven't yet got to production on any of those. There's one that might happen this year and maybe not. But one reason community, and why I felt that this is a great thing for us to share and kind of work through together, is because writers are basically generally separate. And in terms of the power structure of how stories are told, even though we're the ones mostly responsible for the material, we have very little power in the stories we get to tell. And it's both capital driven and it's power driven. In terms of broadcasters and they are telling us and deciding what stories we will be telling, and then often censoring it and putting it into boxes accordingly. But as I say, I do think that there is something, if you set into this, like basically every single indigenous culture in the world, the storyteller was a shaman and was very important in the structure of the society, and was essentially helping to create that cultural myth. The role was seen, one, as shamanic, in the sense that you're bringing in, wisdom almost from another world. And two, that it was just really recognized as being important in the social structure. And we still understand this today in some ways, in the sense that, we recognize the power of stories. So as a propaganda medium, a lot of what's dictating, what films get made internationally. And it's not about so much what is told, but as what is not told. I think a lot of us are going through both challenges and frustrations, in terms of the industry we find ourselves in versus our own natural intuition about the way it should be. And, the writers, mostly we have to tell stories that come from our heart and our experience. And to tell the stories best that we could best tell, it does often come from our own worlds and our own experience. And then yet we don't have the opportunity to tell our stories. We're asked to construct stories that maybe we're less suited to telling, or alternatively don't believe in, or, don't have the freedom to spend the time needed, do the research needed, have the process we need to make the material great. Because particularly with screenplay, it's such a technical medium, and it's so based on practicalities of locations and sets and budgets and all of that, marketing, etc., that you do need to be able to work with a team. It dictates that there's a process, and unless we can get a process that supports us, we're never going to be able to write to our true potential. And I think, better understanding what we're going through, better understanding the challenges, just as you say, agony aunts a little bit, at least being able to share is in itself therapeutic. But beyond that, I think we as a storytelling culture in South Africa, particularly screenwriting, filmmaking culture, haven't yet had the opportunity to evolve, because we're all kind of doing it individually. And I think if we are to pool experience, pool knowledge, that I really do feel we've got amazing stories in this country. We've got amazing perspective. We do live a different experience from the kind of official Western narrative that reaches us, which also is not necessarily representative of people's actual lives in the places where those are made. But we are further from that. And I think the potential here is just so enormous. And then I always kind of feel so sad that in a way it's being crushed and suppressed without even realizing that that's what's happening on the part of, other institutions and the people with the money and the thing. And it's dynamics, and it's often unconscious. It's like marketers have their perspective on the world and their needs in order to raise money. And so they're dictating genre stuff that, it has its own validity, but maybe, is preventing much more amazing things from coming, which they would love to see, but couldn't imagine. So it's not necessarily nefarious, it's just what it is. So, if there's a generation of storytellers, we can start learning to work together and realize, that we're all in the same boat. I think we'll be in a much better position.
Yeah, I agree with you. Definitely do, because you've just mentioned something that was really important. I think almost in general, many people are inherently conservative when it comes to their money. And if you could think of the custodians that are safeguarding, I suppose, the funds for film, the funds for TV, the funds for the arts and culture, I won't speak specifically of government organizations, but generally the people who have the ability to say yes or no. Most of the time they're governed by conservative instincts, and that is to create something that's going to bring that money back, plus a little bit more, plus have something that they can sell thereafter. And I think it's a thing that, as a writer, as a storyteller of some kind, you have to be able to recognize and balance and really strengthen your own storytelling ability to be able to help whoever is funding your craft. Because remember, this is a money-based thing. It's a money thing that we have to acknowledge and accept, and it enables us. It really does. The money aspect really enables us to create stories and to make things. Maybe you don't need a lot of it to create something beautiful, but you have to recognize that. And I think that level of professional craft, that level of recognizing that you have your tools, you are a great writer, but you need to be able to work with people, and you need to be able to work with expectations, managing those as well, is a really important thing. Because the reality is, sometimes it isn't the story you wrote, it isn't the voice you had that gets the project made, but who was involved in helping that project get made. It's a weird thing. It's a scary thing, but it's also a very positive thing, because it opens up the opportunities as a storyteller. I believe. I would like to believe. So we're gonna actually, I think, maybe jump straight to the community with this next part, and that I know everyone's got a lot of questions, and I would like more questions about what we spoke about right now, because it's very personal. It's very much digging down to the nitty-gritty of saying, why do we write? But I actually want to ask something that, Gavin, you mentioned. What does anyone in this community think we need to evolve our storytelling in SA? Do we need to evolve our storytelling in SA? Do we need to reach a certain level? Is there a level? Are we missing it? Are we reaching it? What does anyone in the community think about that? And please be frank. There's no wrong answers about this, especially because this is very much a fundamental belief question as well. Are we reaching what we need? Hi, Kate. Yeah.
I found that so often when I've been to industry festival events, that producers have a very set idea about what they think the South African audience wants to watch. And I've found those, they've got boxes that they've fitted up, they've got, this is the kind of movie, Skopskippendono, or slapstick, or gangster. And I'm just like, not everybody wants to watch that. And there's so many other stories. Every other screenwriter I speak to has got a different story they're wanting to tell, but producers aren't wanting to hear them. And so I've quite often come up against this very narrow concept of what producers think the South African audience wants to watch. And it's not that I know what the South African audience wants to watch. I just think the South African audience is so diverse that put it in such little narrow boxes, we're missing tons of audience. And not just South African audience, but creating content that would appeal to a globe locally and to a global audience as well. Like make, the kind of interesting offbeat content that you see in the UK and Australia as well, and that has got, has become, popular worldwide as well. Anyway, that's yeah.
Thanks, Kate. So, I mean, and we're going to get to Lingolo just now. I see your hand. What I'm gathering from what you're saying is that necessarily there is a gap between what we're producing for our screens and the literal bodies that are engaging with what's on screen. And I think that because producing is a lot about making products, hence the name producing, you are engaging with the market interest. You're engaging with what's going to sell, what the broadcasters need to engage those seats and so forth. But you necessarily end up losing on some of the big possible stories that the crowds would actually want. I mean, I agree with you, Kate. I actually do. And I think before Gavin jumps onto this, I would like to just state that, yes, I do think that there's definitely a massive gap between the audience in South Africa and the platforms and the storytellers as a result because of those platforms. I mean, we've seen with Matwetwe and we've seen with Losing Lerato, two forms which by no convention, work by certain funding organization standards. But I'm not going to say that they don't work. It's just that they are not marketable to the greater your distribution network we have in SA, but they were absolute standout hits in the cinema. In fact, they were both of them funded in freaky and unusual ways, which are now becoming landmark funding models for the South African filmmaking industry. So I do believe that, yes, there's definitely a disconnect. Now, I think that sometimes that disconnect, a lot of the platform, a lot of the industry is pretty scared in trying to overcome that gap, trying to overcome the gap between reaching really what's in audience's minds. Because there's this huge buffer of, hey, we know what works. It's worked for 20 something years. We're going to keep making what works. And it's a risk thing. It really is a risk thing, because our major broadcasters are corporations, right? So I would say, Kate, that if you have a story that you think would work for someone, I think it really does become a case of create a really small version of that. I think I've spoken to you about this before, but create a really small version of it. Put it out into the world, put it out into the rest of SA. You have to be the champion of it, obviously, but put it out there, make something happen, prove that there's market for it. And really, you can't argue with viewers. You can't, no platform in this world can argue with the number of viewers that your product might get, your film might get, your series might get. But I say this, it's a lot harder than me just saying it. But I would say, if you wanted to challenge, instead of working with the people who are making the content on screens, I think that might be a way of doing that. Creating your own thing, putting it out there, making it work. And that is your test case. That is your portfolio. Okay, so Gavin.
Also, just in terms of sharing, because I think Kate is sharing is something that is really the root of part of a lot of our frustration and problems. That people have these specific editors and think they know what will sell. We're all quite familiar, I'm sure, with human psychology, and there's just a thing that people like to believe that they know the way something is. It doesn't matter whether it's politics or COVID or film. They want to say this is the way it is because it feels psychologically secure. And as a producer, your whole job is to know. And the truth is that with story and art generally, there's something ineffable. There's something that is magical about it. And people want a good story, and they don't know what it is necessarily until they see it. It's easy to market, okay, they're going to do the romantic comedy. Lots of romantic comedies don't really make money because they're just formulaic and people just, they don't get gripped, even though it's a very lucrative genre. And really, partly the problem here is power, because the producer needs to be the one who's delivering, I know, I'll get you the result to my investor, and I know. But really, the writer is the generator of the film. And for the producer, that's quite a hard thing to have to deal with, that theoretically they want to be their film and they want to be responsible and they want to own the rights. And so they almost have to undermine the writer, because then if to concede the writer's true position is also to concede that they're not entitled to the rights, because it's this person's imagination and soul that's going into this work. And truly, if we had a real system, it would be writer generated content, because it is coming out of your soul and your experience. And if anything interesting and unique is going to emerge, it's going to come from there and not from a prior conception of what your story should be that you are going to write. And in that case, like if it's much easier in music, where it's so easy to record nowadays, and music, the best music's coming out nowadays, amazing music, and most of it's coming from the independents who can just get together a group of talented people and record the thing. And when film reaches that place, because I know it's very easy to say go do the thing yourself, but obviously paying for your own time in our system is very hard in South Africa to just get the time to write the thing, let alone to arrange the team to help you film it. And because it is such a collaborative thing, that we all fall into that catch-22. It's really hard unless you are already connected. A lot of people are willing to help you to get to that place where you can make anything yourself that's of a caliber that it can be shown. So it is the catch-22, and I just wanted to maybe fill out a bit of the picture there. Can we bounce maybe to Lungelo, Thabiso? Are you good?
Yeah, thanks. You added that. I like that last part as well. It's hard, but new waves happen across the world as a result of it being hard. So I think that we have opportunity here as well, especially with a stagnant content on screen right now. Lungelo, yes.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having this. I'm just gonna, I just want to talk about what you're talking about now, but I just need to give a brief history of who I am. I'm basically, I think, when I finished high school, I was at Wits actually for a few months, and I got a scholarship, and I went to the US, and I studied in the US, ended up studying more, ended up living there, and then fast forward, I'm now in my mid-30s, and I come back home, and my family has lived here forever, and I've been coming and visiting home every year or two. But what I'm just saying that because when I came back home, which is now 4 or 5 years ago, I left as a teenager. I was still 17. Yeah, I was 17 when I left. I came back in my mid-30s, so I didn't really have like a network or a sense of what it's like to be a professional working South African filmmaker. I'm a director, writer. I'm a director, writer, and teacher. I came back home. I've always wanted to come home, but I want to come home to have a job and be able to, support myself and, family and whatever. So I ended up teaching, and I teach film directing at AFTA, and that's what I do to pay the bills. So that's just about me, just to let you know where I'm coming from in terms of, answering these questions. But I'm saying that, I'm prefacing all of that with the idea that I think what Kate was saying and what everybody's saying about the frustration between the relation between the producer, channel, and not necessarily the audience, but the producer and channel, and the idea of what I think you just said now, Gavin, about, film, and I'm talking about film in particular, although I think cinema now is also found in television. Cinema is found, like just the quality of work. I think the quality of work in South Africa, we need to do much more. I think that there are many more stories, diverse stories that we need to explore and we need to tell. But like all of you are saying, it's just people don't want to take the chance, but that's how growth and new things come up. And so I'm actually stuck now. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but now it's becoming a bad thing, is that I'm stuck teaching because I need to pay the bills and I need to sustain myself. And I'm afraid from trying to I've done a little bit of freelance work here and there, but I'm afraid that like there's so many restrictions and you gotta do this kind of work. Or if you have this awesome idea that's yours, and if I'm gonna like bang my head against the wall and bleed, I'm gonna do it because it's this idea I believe in. It's part of who I am, and it's And when the producer says nobody wants to watch that, or nobody, I'm like, but if you want me to write this and you to maximize the potential of the idea, you have to give me the space and time to do this, and not just like whittle it down to whatever everybody thought sold great last year. And I'm struggling with that in the industry, and I'm writing my own stuff. I'm writing a short. I'm working on a feature right now, but I'm afraid to like, and I'm getting it because I've been applying for money, and people are just like, oh, this is not, when I get notes, people are just saying like, they want this film to be very familiar and very comfortable. I'm like, but that's what people did last year, and I'm glad it worked, but give me the space and let's try and grow the industry, and let's try and like do new things, and let's show ourselves and the world that like you say, South Africa is such a unique country, but we don't have enough self-belief and enough, sorry, there's like construction next door, and not enough just like, I think other film countries, in Scandinavia, the Japanese, the Koreans, they invest in their local cinema, and now, they're big industries and they're important to that GDP, if you will, but they all like believed in themselves and told their own stories. And while Hollywood is the giant, and Bollywood and the Brits, but there's Scandinavian films, there's Australian films, there's all these film industries where the countries would said we're going to support the arts and make our own thing, and now we all know and respect them. But somehow in South Africa, we just don't have the long-term vision and the true desire to do that. And then also coming from the US, I'm just so shocked and surprised we're still unable to unionize and able to have, I think the word structure was used earlier or something like that, where it's like the producers got their role, but the producer can't override the writer just for the sake of I'm the boss, I'm in charge, I need to be king all the time. There just needs to be more structures and more order where like we all share the power. And like you say, the stories come from the soul of the writer, yet the writer is the one who seems to be like pushed away, like, hey, we gotta shoot next week, so we'll just shoot the first draft of this and it's gonna be okay, it's gonna make money. But it's like, if we spend another 4 or 5 weeks, or 5, 6, 7 drafts, we could actually shoot something that's of a higher quality and could actually travel to the rest of the continent or to the rest of the world. But because money and people not wanting to take chances, we're not allowing for creativity to grow, and we're not respecting the role of the writer. Because I do find it problematic that the producer owns the product, but I'm like, yeah, but you didn't write this. Like, you didn't spend hours and days and weeks trying to figure out every single sentence of this particular script. So anyway, sorry, long story short, that's it, I'm done. I love what's happening, and I'm glad we're part of a community, and I've been looking for something like this since I've been back, because I'm just like, where can writers talk, learn about each other, share work, share what the industry is like? But I'm an independent writer, director, because I'm so afraid of the industry, because I know I'm always getting roadblocks because it is not like the other thing from the other day. I'm like, of course it's not. That's the whole point. We're supposed to grow and diversify, and the audience will come and hug and want new stories. But it seems like we're all like playing it safe, and like whatever sold last week, that's what I must do this week, and that's what the other person must do the next week. And it's just like, how are we gonna grow and actually be a powerful industry and be, recognized by our own rights if we're not encouraging thinking outside the box? All right, that's it. Right.
Thanks, Lungelo. Actually, thanks. I appreciate it. I appreciate the sentiments that you're bringing as well. I think that any person in this group who's strove to make anything in SA, especially independently, has come up against this exact same challenge. I would say that film, and I'm not going to speak of series. I think there are much smarter people than me to speak about series here, but film has its big renaissance moments when filmmakers recognize that you don't need to have all the money in the world to make something. And that's something that I want every person in this group to try break out of the mindset of. It really is a case that you don't need $1 million, or you don't need 3 million rand to make a feature film in SA. I know, to pay everyone fairly by caller crew rates, that would be the case. But that's if you have 50 to 60 people on your set. Look at indie. Look at the way the French New Wave started. You have amazing filmmakers like Godard, Truffaut, Bresson, who are making films literally with a camera and 5 people on set and 2 actors with an apartment they broke into and the street they ran on to get the footage. I think that when we adopt the mindset of the Nigerians in terms of making our films and our series, where they are innovative with how they get funding for their films, or they're innovative with how they make their films. They know they'll make the money afterwards, but they're innovative in how they fund their films because they're inherently an entrepreneur. If we can access that, bring it back home, and make things that are, we keep it small in the beginning, make a simple story that speaks to you, put it out there, fight for it, put it out and build up from there, we might have a chance. I think indie is the way forward for breaking this monopoly, well, this stagnation in the industry. It also means, of course, becoming perhaps your own producer or meeting another writer-director who has the same mindset as you, wanting to make things, but doesn't want to make the same, for lack of a better word, same shit as we saw last year. Splitting up the producing task between you guys and making something, because we have to do it. That's the way it is. That's how new waves happen. And remember that every industry changes as a result of a new wave that happens. They adopt the stuff that makes that new wave successful. Look at America. Look at the Mexican new wave, which recently happened. America is now dominated by the way they made films. The Mexican, the 5 Mexican filmmakers, they are, copycatting that because of, they had to do it. They had to find a way to make those films. So Lungelo, really, I would say, don't give up. Keep that independent spirit. You have to pay the bills. Yes, I understand 100%. But there are ways of making films for less than $1 million. And I want you to actually go into the DTI's their new funding policy. They're actually funding films of 500,000 Rand now. They recognize that we can actually make films for that amount of money, and it may not be the best film in the world, but it'll get you started, and that's what counts more than anything else, right? I know Gavin wants to say something.
Yeah. Let me just jump in, and then maybe some other people, because I think this is such a core issue that I'm sure everyone has their own perspective on it. And Thabiso, I love you. You're such you're an optimist. I really appreciate it, and I agree with what you're saying there. On the other hand, I'm going to play devil's advocate and point to the fact that there's some real truthful systemic challenges in South Africa what you're saying. And pretty much anywhere as well. I mean, if one looks at the countries Lungelo cited as well, like South Korea, Japan, Australia, they're not America, but they're still big economies. They're much bigger than South Africa. I see Keir's questions about the NFEF and having to make money. The amount that the NFEF has to spend, compared to Scandinavian filmmaking companies is a fraction of a fraction, and they don't have the luxury of just funding whatever. They did try, like at first they were funding. There was no requirement for the films to be profitable, but then because government's losing so much money and they've got so little access, they did want to see their investment returned. And just because that will give them the opportunity to fund more. So they do want to, as far as possible, fund films that will recoup just to make possible more development and more production. And then their own perspectives on what will do that comes in. And again, there is a requirement that it's a part of it. It's not an overriding requirement. Sorry, just looking at your question coming in, but it's definitely one of the factors that are taken into consideration. Will it be profitable? Will it recoup its money? It's on the funding evaluation form. When you score it, it does. When you look at the business model, etc., in discussion, it's important. It's not a nothing. But going back to those systemic issues, because creative-driven content is very rare everywhere. So there's the independent model, and a lot of that is still independent producers who are often middlemen to the money, and they're not producing anything. There's so many independent romantic comedies out there. It's not independent, definitely doesn't mean creative or out the box. And systemically, because filmmaking is both time consuming and capital intensive, even if it's, the lowest budget, in South Africa, again, we don't have disposable income here, most of us, especially if you're in film. So you get to the place where, just raising 50,000 Rand can be a real challenge, plus to find the time and trust to find the people. So we are kind of, I think, somewhat held back there. The technology and everything is shifting in our direction. I mean, for me, my absolute wet dream fantasy is that at some point there will be a platform that is creative driven, where we just directly connect with our audience, because there's no reason. We just need a website. As filmmaking professionals and creatives, you need a website where the audience can just log in and watch your content and be charged a subscription, and the money can go to the filmmakers. Netflix is basically just that middle person between the audience and the content producers. And you could definitely have an internet platform where that was systematized and basically works on behalf of both the audience and the filmmakers, where the audience might be able to even order more of the sort of content they make, and filmmakers could just draw in a pot of pool to make those things, or pitch directly to the audience and let them vote on what they want made. There's lots of ways, but essentially, if we were to be able to work as a pool to fund the development of such a platform, it could work in a professional body, and there could be everything from people starting at nothing, doing local projects for their local communities, that's part of it, and all the way up as they gain their skills, and some sort of guild that monitors quality and talent and who's ready to do what. Because the biggest for me, the biggest absolute challenge in this, so I think we all, as also I don't work as a director, but directing is definitely what I want to do, and I have some experience, but I don't, because the only negotiating power I have is the script. So mastering screenwriting is the first step if you're going to do that. because to write like that one, I'm sure we've all tried it, that like one venue, one location, small cast script, is to do it in a way that'll break you out is harder than writing a massive big budget Hollywood feature well, because it's got to be independent, it's got to be unique, and you've got nowhere to go but character and story and a small location. And it's not when Reservoir Dogs came up, the competition at the moment and the amount of films out there and the amount of noise out there is bigger now than it's ever been. So there's lots of people from all over, grabbing their iPhone and trying to make something. To develop the skills to be able to do it to the level that we need to, is like, is how many people play golf and how many people get to be a truly well-earning professional golfer. That's the competition. We're even more that much more people love film than love golf, I'm presuming. I'm not a big golf fan, but that is the challenge, and we have to accept that. And then also in terms of the process, so to do that, to write that script that's at that level is going to take, it's going to take you, like, again, you're mostly not going to be paid for it. So you have to, like, when you find energy and time, so it's going to take you at least a year to do your, like, something really good, but then you're stuck in your own head. So you need someone to give you some perspective, probably a second draft and so on. And it has to come also out of that process. And then you probably need practicals, and then you have to rewrite based on, okay, well, I thought I was going to have 3 locations, but now I just got 2. So I have to redo this, etc. So the challenges are significant. I mean, it's not that it can't be done, and I'm fully with you. It's kind of what needs to be done. But to do it basically requires something of a miracle, unless, we can kind of figure it out. It's not easy.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. Look, that's the other side as well. There's the money thing. The money question is always going to be there. It's always going to be part of the question, and really depends on what your expectations are for the thing that you want to make. I think that if you are looking to make a 4 million rand film, yes, you're going to have to convince someone to come on board as your producer, and you're going to have to go to the NVF and DTI and so forth, and find a platform with your distributors. I would say that the smaller the project is, the more opportunity you have to produce it yourself. My career is based off independent filmmaking, where we made things with almost no money, but they were made. Maybe not the best, but definitely were made. So I do believe that it's possible. I'm a direct, but unfortunately it's not very sustainable. And if you need sustainable because you've got a family and everything, yeah, you're gonna have to be working that other thing as well to keep yourself going. And that's just it's an unfortunate reality, but it also keeps you responsible to your family. And you never know, you might bump into the guy who can give you 10 million rand for your feature, while working your day job, because he secretly always wanted to make a film, but he's never had the opportunity to meet people like you to make those films. So I'm going to quickly jump back to what Clea said, and I'm going to ask Nelson to jump on board. And I see your hand is up. We're going to definitely get to you. But Nelson had mentioned something that I wanted to answer to, but it's more of a question of poking and prodding him as to what he thinks about it. So first of all, Clea, is there a requirement that they need to make money? Wow. Okay. So that's the NFVF's funding model for production. So the idea is that they don't give you the money for free, that it's a soft loan, if that makes any sense. You have to, at some point, return on investment for the money that's given to you. Now, that's why there is a maximum cap of 1 million something. It's what's considered to be a reasonable amount of money for you to be able to pay back. However, if your film never makes a profit, if your film never achieves the point at which its return on investment is viable, they do write it off. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying that's something you should be aspiring to. And it does definitely leave a stain on your reputation at the NAVF. But the idea is that they know filmmaking takes a while, and they know that it does take a while for film to make its money back. There are things called windows of distribution. There's a wonderful course that I think everyone in this group should find. It's called The Business of Film. It's through Film London, if I remember correctly. It's free, it's online. Go to it. It's a really good course. And I think that every screenwriter needs to know their craft, as well as how that craft yields the money flow of film. And I think if you do that, a little bit of that, you'll find yourself finding, more opportunities than you think. So I just want to go back to what Nelson had said. So YouTube. So I'm actually curious about this. Is it possible to make money with YouTube? or is it possible to make money off a free platform? Do you not think that it still needs to require, it still requires you to have a Kickstarter or a Patreon or something? You know, you're funding the model itself, and then through advertising on YouTube, you get some. I mean, I'm curious to hear how it works in your side. So after you finish, I would like to jump back to Wiam and Clea. I think you have your hand up as well. I've noted you guys. Nelson?
Hi, sorry. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak about that. I didn't know I had a chance. I mentioned YouTube because of what Christopher had said. Sorry, my apologies. Gavin. The names, yes. He mentioned about a platform where people can actually host their work and actually showcase what's done. And YouTube was that for a very long time prior. But now we're finding that YouTube's become self-regulatory. So therefore, you can't necessarily showcase your work such a way that you can build an audience as relatively easy as it was before, due to the explosion of content, the amount of people that are actually trying to do their best. So a good 10 years ago, yes, you could make money off YouTube. And then they raised the cap, and now it's harder still. So you need to have that sort of spark that gets people to really want to see your work. In terms of what he was mentioning about a platform, there are alternatives. Like, for instance, Jameson First Shot is a wonderful initiative where they get you to actually submit a script, and whatever gets chosen gets made. But at the same time, it's content that's curated and doesn't involve an algorithm that is actually pushing out based on keywords or whatever. Instead, it's actually people that sit and actually look through the content and say, this is the stuff that we feel is actually really good, and so we want to showcase it for it. So there is those platforms out there. It's very diverse and multitudes and so many, and I think that is actually important for us to be aware of them and actually have it all, you know, publicized, so that we then start submitting to it. It just gets a lot frustrating knowing that you mix that up with a lot of submission festivals and etc. that seems to primarily talk about just submit your script or sell your script to us, or, you know, like the Blacklist is one of the best examples of it. But I don't find it to be very pushing of content in itself. And so I think it's really frustrating for a writer. And I myself am not in the film industry really. I'm aspiring, even though I hate to call myself aspiring, because I have written. I just never even gotten to the point of even trying to sell. I think, however, just to the point of what, as Gavin said about, and I joked with YouTube, but YouTube used to be that. Instead, I know that there are places where people care about showcasing good work and celebrating good work. And it should just be that people should be aware of it. So yeah, sorry, this was completely improvised. Thank you very much for putting me on the spot. Appreciate it.
May I also just say, like, to me, the YouTube, even in the heyday, is very far from what I'm talking about, because YouTube is a, you know, platform that is built to make money for YouTube. And, you know, and it's advertiser driven and always has been. You know, they're taking that free content and then again, that middleman who's profiting on it on behalf of the audience. And before they used to pay content creators a bit more, now less, but always it's been very hard to make real money on YouTube, especially if you want to make a feature film or a series. And with Jameson First Shots, you know, again, it's like more an exhibition thing. What I'm talking about is really the creators themselves having a platform where all the business is done between them and the audience, and they are actually profiting. They're distributing their own work, not via the medium of someone who's doing that or being the middleman and paying, you know. Anyway, was it who was first there? Did Wiam put his hands down?
Yeah, but before we get to Wiam, I just want to thank Nelson for the comments. I think I really appreciate them. It is definitely a struggle, especially if you've never made anything before as a writer, to get recognized as a writer and then to get funded as a writer. It is a difficult process. I will tell you straight, Blacklist, all those things are, and film festivals, you know, film script festivals and everything. You know, there are a lot of people applying to them. It's a frank reality. If your work is good, someone's going to recognize it, true. But I found more success in making something small with people that you can trust, that you can ask and beg for free to help you to make this thing, attaching your name as having written by Nelson, written or produced by Nelson. I mean, attach your name to it, take that, because no one likes to read, they like to see. And I think that's the only bit of advice I can give to everyone of the year. People don't like to read things, they like to see things. That's why in the industry, there's a word, I mean, there's a saying, you're only as good as the last project you're on. So I would say, do what you can to make that project happen, even if it's a small project, because it goes from there. And it's the band-aid you need to pull off. And trust me, it's a lot easier to pull off a band-aid for a short that people can moan and complain about for 20 minutes. And then, you know, while they're watching it, and then you get to defend it afterwards, than it is for a 90-minute feature film in which you have to answer a lot of questions. Believe me, I've been in that position. But I would say rip that band-aid off, put it out there, and you'll find more opportunities coming up. You'll find producers coming up to you and saying, we like what you did over there. Do you think you could do it a bit longer for us? So I see, Claire, you've got your hand up. We are going to come to you. Riam actually had a question before. So Riam, would you please jump on quickly? Is Riam still here?
Hi, sorry, my mic was on mute.
I hope you're saying it's right. Riam, right?
Yeah. So I just want to add to the conversation. You know, I think, I don't know your name. I'm new to the Writers Guild. This is my first meeting. So the guy who says Writers Guild, I'm not sure what your name is.
He's Gavin.
Gavin, hi Gavin. So, you know, the point about writing being a big part of shamanic culture, I think that's a very relevant point. And it's something that we need to explore as South Africans, you know. The conversation around writing being very prescriptive and generic, you know, producers are prescribing what audiences want. And if we're not allowed to experiment and actually tell authentic stories, how will we actually know that there is an audience for what it is that we're wanting to create? And so I think, you know, there's so much to explore in this country, both what, you know, what is obvious, but also what is shamanic, and not in the very traditional sense and in the way we're seeing it at the moment, but in a more kind of magic realism way, you know. And we as writers, I think, you know, everyone's talking about the frustrations and how much we want to tell more stories, but at the end of the day, a lot writers also, we're not always activists, you know. And so how do we, you know, how do we take this conversation forward then? If we're saying producers are always prescribing to us what audiences want, but also, you know, there's no room for experimentation for us to actually put out what we wanted to audiences. Yeah, that's my question. How do we balance these things? Look, I've been able to make the films I want to because I work as an editor, I direct, I do all kinds of things in the industry. So I've been able to write and tell stories and also play the part sometimes if I wanted to. So, you know, but I mean, obviously there are bigger projects one wants to do and involve more people and have more ambitious stories. So how do we balance this?
So Gavin, I think it's just changed his name to Gavin on the thing. Thanks, Gavin. Appreciate that. I think everyone can see it now. I'm actually going to answer, because you actually had 3 points to what you said, and I like those 3 points. I really want to answer them. The whole idea behind taking risky narrative, and that's taking genres that we don't think work and putting them into the screen and trying our luck. I don't want to say that South Africa has like the most broad form of drama that we can get, because drama seems to be very much family drama. But if you want an example of magic realism that's working for our screens, and it's not very good, but it's there, check out Mzansi Magic. A lot of the Mzansi Bioscope films are dealing with magic realism and witchcraft, and we never ever give those guys credit, because it's not great. But we never give them credit because they do a lot of work to portray crazy stories, crazy inventive stories. It's just the execution is not so good. But we have to investigate, how did they make those films? Is there a way we can insert ourselves into that world and make better films with them, so that as these creatives are getting started, we can push forward this weird, crazy genre of magic realism through their efforts, because they get a lot of funding. It's just that the execution is not so great, because they don't quite have the help that they need. And Mzansi Magic, I'm speaking specifically of Mzansi Magic and Mzansi Bioscope. You should definitely check their stuff out. You might find yourself surprised. That's a comment, it's not a solution. I think that if you get an opportunity to watch their stuff, to watch them, the bioscope films, you'll see what I'm talking about. Then the risk. So before, I think 2010, there were no colored films on DSTV. There were no colored series on DSTV. Yet those things, those stories were coming through the Silver Scam Theus quite prevalently. Then DSTV recognized, wow, there's actually a huge potential for colored film, for colored series. And as a result, they created platforms. We have CakeNet's, they have the colored channels, but that didn't exist, 10 years ago. But because people were trying their hardest and were creating short films, which they found representation in different publicly available platforms, that the broadcaster had to adapt. And they knew that if ETV or SABC capitalized on it, they were not going to capitalize it fast enough and make money off of it. But that's just a sign. It was a completely risky market for them to get into, but they did, and the dividends have been huge for them. So I think personally, when it comes to risk, the industry is a blind thing that follows what it can smell, and really what it can smell is success, and it adapts as a result. I know that it's a very optimistic way of looking at it, but I've seen the shifts happen so many times. So I believe it's possible for it to change, for it to grow, and for it to actually take up risk as an appetizing thing. If it recognizes that there are audiences who want to engage with it. And I think that sort of answers the third, well, I think that sort of speaks to the third point that you're making, being activists, activists as filmmakers, as writers and so forth. Really, we have to take the risk. And I know I'm going to scream it over and over again, and I think Gavin's going to counter me with some very useful real world advice. But I really want everyone to investigate how they can make their film with their phones, and how they can make their films with what they have in front of them, with the people they have around them. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be very, very good. But if you can speak to something that really speaks to yourself and a few other people in your community, you make something that speaks to them, and you find a way of putting it out there. And it can just be as short of 5 to 10 minutes. You might find through that form of activism, that form of independent filmmaking, you might find greater shifts happening. But that's my perspective. And we're going to jump to what Clea wants to speak about as well. But I think, Gavin, if you want to add something to that while we have the time.
Well, I think I won't be contradicting you this time. I agree fully with your point. Somehow it has to come through people, and somehow. And VM, I'll just mention that I've been working on a shamanic feature film that comes partly through my experience, but is set in a different cultural perspective. And I've been working on it 5 years. It won the best unproduced feature at the Guild Awards this year, and could be that I'm still takes me another 3 odd years, 5 odd years to make it happen, or something like that. But eventually it will, and eventually it will come out, and then I hope it will, open up a new realm for that sort of story. But it'll be a 10-year journey if it does, and if it does, is very, very, very far from clear, that it'll actually ever get there. But what can you do but have faith and give it a bash. Clear.
Hi, thanks. I'm trying to gather my thoughts. It's been a lot of interesting discussion. I guess I just wanted to mention a couple of things, and maybe I'll just lead with, I just wanted quickly to go back to the NFEF thing. I don't really know, I work as an editor as my day job, and then I write on the side, so to speak, but I have recently co-written a film for Flicknet, and that was a 500,000 Rand 1-hour TV film. So that's kind of my first live action writing credit that will be up, which is awesome. So it's great that they're just, I think that there were 64 films that CakeNet gave money for, right? And different production companies got like a slate of 10, and then they came up with ideas, and then they gave it to people to write. So that's super fortunate way to kind of get a little foot in to have a good writing credit. I am curious about, I'm curious about the NFEF, because I've always sort of thought to myself, and I don't really, know that it's interesting that, they tried it one way and now they've kind of gone on this route. So they probably are doing what they think is best. I just have always thought to myself, if there was like one place where like we could go off script, so to speak. Like I kind of think it makes sense in my head that it would be the NFVF. It's almost like, yeah, that thing of that would then be the place where people could almost, yes, they'll still have the script editors and making sure this is like a compelling narrative. But if there was one place to experiment where there was that freedom given, to me, it always felt like it could be that place. But short of that being something which they could find a way to make work, this is really, you know, cemented for me, this discussion, that the other place to do it is in that absolute just kind of gung-ho, like, yes, you always have to feed the crew, but like just trying to do something small and short to put that idea out there, and then that can gain traction because people are looking for interesting content online. And then they'll maybe take the conversation further with seeing that that got a lot of views. It is a fast way to show that you've got an audience for something. So I think that's kind of good advice, as jaded as people might be, to try and still, you know, I think we're also scared. Like, I know it's difficult, but I also know I could literally go out there with my cell phone and like make a documentary, even, like, you know, I mean, I know it's easier because you don't need actors and all of that, and you don't need to feed yourself. You can just go out there and do that. But I just wanted to mention, like, the thing is with the NFVF, they're still sticking to that like traditional structure. It's not just that they want you to maybe like motivate how it can make money, but they're also sticking to a very traditional structure that you have to hit. So yeah, again, it's like, where is that place to be super creative if it's not there? But again, maybe just with ourselves. And just, I just wanted to mention a couple of other avenues for people, since this is quite a general discussion in a way. There are, Gavin, we've spoken about this. There is the Right Project, who are offering funding at the moment in South Africa. Maybe some of you have seen the call outs through the WGSA emails and stuff. I will definitely feed back once I've got money in the bank from them, because I'm in theory through to get funding for a short, which would be the first time ever. But yeah, we're still just negotiating and all of that. But I think that that could be another great place for people to look, should it all work out. And then also just to consider, to just keep an eye if you have any interest in animation, which is something I'm very involved in the animation industry in the country. There are every now and again opportunities to also look at writing for animation, and it's just another avenue to go down, especially during COVID. It's been an industry that's been able to keep going because we're all sitting behind the computers and there's not actually any actor that needs to get onto set. So if you've ever sort of thought about it, take another look there. Yeah, especially during these times. I think that's all I wanted to say. Thanks for listening.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Cleo. I'm actually going to, two things very quickly. You said that you made your film through Freaknet for 500,000 Rand. That's great. They made a 1 hour broadcast worthy feature film on 500,000 Rand. A lot of people, when they apply for NFVF funding, they only look at that as starting funding. Why not be the funding in of itself to make the film? And I think that they fund anywhere from the region of 200, 300, 500,000 Rand up to 1 point something for a feature, for a massive feature film. Why not take that money and make a feature film from that? That's just a radical idea. I know that it's, I know a lot of people disagree with that idea, but I think there's definitely a merit to that. We have the technology, we have the experience, we can do those things. And I do agree with you, the NFVF is a place where they should be doing that. And the NFVF does do that. The NFVF actually does fund a lot of crazy films. The problem is that NFVF is only one funding organization that's needed to fund a major feature film if you're going to be going for a major feature film. Kate just recently told us the story of what happened to her. And those government organizations, unfortunately, don't always speak to each other. So maybe it's a case of finding the funding from one place, make the thing from that one place, and then with that, go to the other organizations to get sequential funding from them. Kevin, I know you want, I don't know if you want to say something, but I would love to actually give Mboseni a chance to speak, then Kate, and then we can end it off because we're at 5:30. Okay, can I go straight to Mboseni? So once again, Clear, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I think that everyone in this group really start looking at yourself, start looking at your value as a filmmaker, as a writer, and find that as being the thing you can start projects with. You are a project starter. Don't ever forget that. You are the ones who can create your own project. It's a matter of bringing other people on board and filling out forms and pitching. Really, unfortunately, it's that, but you are a project starter. Never forget that. Mbonaseni, please jump on.
Greetings. I'm not sure if I'm audible enough. I haven't been speaking to anyone.
We can hear you.
This morning, I've been in my room all by myself writing, so I'm not sure if my voice is projecting well. Look, I think possibly we as the screenwriters, we have to start thinking seriously about this concept of what is called a concept movie model, contained movie model, where you basically do not, if you are thinking of a feature film, then you think of maybe 25 or so characters. Why don't you think of a contained movie where you might have maybe 2 or 1 character in a feature film? Take the example of The Log. That is a feature film, it's only have got 1 character. So where you will have to consider to say, look, I am going to write a script which will be in a contained environment, 1 location. That's number 1. Number 2, there must be contained characters using that model if you are to be successful in writing the contained movie model. Number 3, those characters, they must be in a different situation for it to be a high concept, because the high concept doesn't mean that there has to be bombs and aeroplanes and all of that. They have to be, your characters in that contained movie, they have to be in a difficult situation. See, number 4, there has to be a strong reason as to why they are contained in that environment. Your characters are contained in that environment. Why are they in that difficult situation? You find that if we start thinking along those lines, it's easier to write a feature film which would be costing less to make. That is 1 point. The second point, I wish to support Gavin. I'm sure if we can just take, if he can just take this further to get, I mean, both of you, of creating, because we are in the WGSA, creating a website or thinking along the lines of creating a website where the script writers will write and shoot their either short films or feature films contained and then project them there, instead of having the producer all the time who will be telling us as to what story to write and what story not to write. I mean, the audience, they are hungry for our stories, but the problem is that you start in 2021 to get the funding or the development funding in 2021, you find that your film or your short film will be made 6 years after or 10 years after. And then what is that? But if we can start writing it on our own and then projecting them onto whatever website, then possibly we can get the money there. So I just wish you guys, if you can take that up and see if it is possible. Now, the third one, it's about storytelling and the haves and the haves not. Usually, when we talk of this storytelling, we are thinking of people, let me make an example of you, Thabiso. Say, okay, Thabiso is going to tell a story. He's going to have everything. He has got the money, he can make it, he can shoot the film and all of that. But we forget that there are those who do not have anything, but who are the good storytellers. Just to make you an example, at the end of July, I engaged the grade 11 learners in writing the short stories. This is Zulu short stories. I assembled 10 of them. They wrote brilliant short stories with great things. You see, then I realized that no, storytelling is not dependent on whether you have or you don't have. They have notes, they've got good stories, but they do not have the wherewithal of making those films. So in the at the current moment, I'm compiling that book, of which if once it is published, then I will make sure that I somehow get some whatever to make sure that those short stories are shot as the short films, because they are very, very, very brilliant. Then the last point was that I've heard somewhere that one can shoot a movie using the iPhone. Now, I just wish to know, because I don't have any idea of what is the appropriate iPhone to use in order to shoot either your feature or your short film, and what accessories do you need in order to make sure that your film becomes compact. Thank you.
Thanks, Mboniseni. Thank you. I actually, because we're running out of time, I'm going to just rapid fire my answers to this, and then I think Gavin will jump in afterwards, but because I have answers for you. So one thing that I wanted to say is, you're talking about creating content for a platform, right? That means, of course, becoming your own producer. It's not that you don't, you see, what we're talking about in terms of producers, or producers who are only driven by, selling to broadcast and so forth. But you need a producer on set, so become your own producer. It's not a very difficult thing to do. You just have to schedule, you have to plan, you have to get gear, you have to meet people, you have to convince them to be part of your film. It's a skill that a lot of people don't have, because it means that you have to get out of your introverted nature and become an extrovert for a little bit of time. But become your own producer. You have that need. Don't wait for someone else. I really think you should go for it. If you have this desire to make your stuff and put it out there, the platforms will exist. I think Gavin and I will, what I will try to do is hunt for some platforms that can facilitate what you're saying. And then, post it in the group. We'll talk about it maybe the next time. But I would say become your own producer if you're going to, if you feel that's the case. Writing, producing, they're actually quite closely aligned. There's all about organization and structure and making something happen, I think. It's just that one's using pens and papers, the other one's using physical things and people, I suppose, to make something.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
You should definitely consider it, because you've spoken about this before, and I think you should become a producer. I think that if you wanted to know about making films with iPhones, yeah, there's so many films that you can make with an iPhone. Watch Tangerine, High Flying Bird. So watch anything by Steven Soderbergh recently. He's made a lot of films on iPhones. And what it is, you just need the phone, you need to have a little lens attachment, and you need to have the software on the phone to record films. And that's Filmic Pro. You can just search for it. I'll put it into the group as well. I'll type it up. You can make a film with that. And just make sure you have good, clean audio. And the reason why I mentioned those three things is because I wish you had, for those grade 11 learners who have written their stories, I wish at some point you were able to get small cameras for them or small phones for them. And then they make their own films, because phones can also edit themselves now. They make their own films, then you go to a local theater or a place that has a big screen TV, and then they get to watch their own films on that screen. You have no idea what it does for the brain, for those kids, especially at that point, because it enables something that really pushes them forward. And like I said, it's all accessible on a phone or an iPad or something. You just have to find a way of motivating through the education of these kids to get those things. And you can. There's so many funds available for the education of kids. I'm pretty sure you could do something. If you manage to get kids together to make short stories, it's just one more step to get them to make their own films. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm full of optimism because you're talking about crazy things and I love it. So I will always attach myself to such things. I want to give the platform to Kate, but I would like Gavin to speak a bit about Mboseni if you have anything to add. You're good. Okay, Kate, please jump in with your question or query.
Okay, so yeah, I'm terrified of making my own stuff and doing it really badly. So that's something I've got to get over. But the thing I wanted to just mention is in this conversation we've been having, so there's the London Screenwriters Festival, which is going to be coming up, and I'm negotiating with the director of the festival for reduced price tickets for us to be able to attend. I bought a ticket, but for the South African writers to attend online. But that's not the point I'm making. Sorry, let me stick to it. So Chris Jones, a few years ago, realized that, just a whole lot of screenwriters out there, incredibly talented, but really struggling to get their voices heard. So he came up with this concept, and the first one was called Impact 50. where that, you know, so people could submit a 2-minute script, and then they chose 50 scripts all in the same theme. And then so it was, that particular theme was the last 2 minutes on Earth before a meteorite was going to hit. So what were you doing and who were you spending that time with, and what were the conversations you were having? So 2 minutes, and the concept being that, right, so it's only 2 minutes, we're all working to the same theme, and because it's only 2 minutes, you can really get it made well. And you can call on professionals to participate, because that's not a lot of time you're asking from them in order to make 2 minutes. So they had a panel who selected 50 best scripts, and they made it and they produced. So it's now this made film of 50 2-minute shorts, all in the same theme. So I think that that's quite a good model to work with. They've also done it with horror. They've got a 52-minute short horrors that they've made into one movie, and then those I think they just broadcast them through YouTube and through film festivals. So now all those writers who were unproduced writers before are now all produced writers with a screen credit. So I think that's something we could think of as the Writers Guild, to come up with a, because like when Viam and Gavin were talking about the whole shamanic thing, I thought, but I don't want to go and wipe out the tide before your film, but I just thought, wow, that would be an interesting theme to explore, you know, and or we could do 32 minutes and make 1 hour of content that could then possibly even see would so what was the what's the platform Claire's film was gone through, which was it, Silver Scudam's Cake Net, what was it,
The Right Project.
the right, no, not that one, Claire, the 60-minute film for TV.
CakeNet.
So if we got a 1 hour of 32-minute shorts, all in the same theme, all well made, you know, that's 30 writers who've now suddenly got a writing credit that they never had. Because I mean, I've been working as a screenwriter for 15 years and I still have not produced. So I don't have, and I've been optioned and I've come close to being greenlit, but I don't have that screenwriting credit that counts so much. And you know, so I'm feeling all inspired about, why don't we look at doing this as a group, you know? And when you've got that group momentum, you're not just doing it on your own, you're not just approaching people on your own. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for today's session.
Thank you, Kate. Thanks. I really, you know, you have no idea how excited I am to hear you guys now thinking about making your own things, to be honest. It would be fantastic. Everything you mentioned, the festival with discount tickets, that's fantastic. Please get in contact with me if something does happen. I definitely want to send it through to the Writers Guild. I think everyone should be participating if they have the means. If not, you know, steal a car or something and then try and make the means happen. And I definitely agree with you. I think that there's so much potential within this group, within the Writers Guild itself, of people to just put something forward that gets you that writing credit. It doesn't have to be perfect. I keep trying to tell people this. It just makes something that speaks to you so that you can defend it when people slander it. And if you believe in it, it goes a long way. Trust me, your thing it'll shine as a result. It doesn't have to be perfect. And really rip that Band-Aid off, make something small. If you make something small and you can attach your name to it, you never know what could happen. I've just put in this group a film called Lights Out, a film by David Sandberg. He wrote it, directed it, produced, shot everything himself, his wife starring in it. That's the film that launched his career. And he did that at the age of 30-something, I think it was 30-something. I think he just had a kid and he had no input in the industry whatsoever, but he built his own gear. He shot the film. It's 2 minutes that really shot his career forward. Now he's making, he just made Shazam. He also made Annabelle Creation. I mean, it is a 1 in a million story. I recognize that, but nothing's stopping you guys from making something like this as well. I really think there's enough energy and creative momentum over here. And remember, if it's made on amount of money that you can stand to lose, then you don't have to worry about that small thing making money. You can just have that as your calling card in the beginning and then work on things to make money. And I don't care what anyone else says. If you've written something, you're a writer. If you've directed something, you're a director. And you should keep that in mind. You have to remember that the whole way through. Don't let anyone else take that away from you. Gavin, do you want to add one last thing for the last minute?
Yeah, just a little closing thought, you know, because essentially what the topic was the writer's calling. And basically, you know, where we went is the challenges. that is faced if you feel that calling. But if it is a genuine calling, if it really is in your soul to do this, if this is your destiny, if it's really, what you are, then they kind of have no choice but to kind of keep going and to kind of make it happen. And that was kind of my, I always say to people sort of in spiritual circles that for me, it was a path of trust, because there was nothing in the outside to make it say it was possible. I just felt this is what I am. So, if life is not, completely random and cruel, then somehow it's going to work out. And to a degree, I think I'm far along enough the path to feel like, well, that was true. I still feel like I'd like to get much further and, have more of what I was hoping for and actually get the stories really out there in the way I'd like to. But I think they still will. So, I think that the 1 in a million thing happens when you just refuse to go away, essentially, and just keep at it. And, do so honestly, because obviously, in that there's a lot of having to submit to reality and learn and grow and change and, roll with the punches and, realize how much you didn't know when you came up with the idea and let go of the old idea and figure out a new idea and keep going. So, in that sense, I think that ultimately, this is what it's really about. It's like, are you being true to yourself? Is it truly in you to do this? Because these are the obstacles. And, I really hope that we get to a system later on which is more loving and more understanding of the people who are doing this work. Because it's not something anyone who really, it's like, oh, I just want to be a filmmaker, and it's a vanity thing and it's a whatever thing, they do fall away unless they got lots of money, and then they're going to lose lots of money as they kind of do the self-glorification thing. Then the only way it happens is if it's truly in your nature to do it. So as I say, one day I hope artists don't have to suffer to be artists, because it does take a long time as any artist to kind of develop mastery. And until you are in our system, no one's going to pay for anything less, because they've got the option to all the international world-class things that other people produce. So there needs to be a way for artists to learn and grow and make their mistakes and find their mastery, where they're not just struggling and wasting all their energy on just how the hell do I pay for myself while I figure this thing out. But it is kind of where we are now. So I'm just going to say that is kind of the thing, and I wish you all luck, and I really pray it works out for all of us.
And I'm just going to add to that. I think that with regards to what we set out to do with this particular conversation, it was just to re-engage everyone and say to them that they can make their own things. And unfortunately, I think I've heard a lot of people coming up against the problem of producers doing this, producers doing that. Look, I'm going to be honest with you, right? We're in a position of power. Producers can't make anything without scripts, and they know that. You have a position of power, but recognize that they also have a financial responsibility to that thing making it work. It's their careers on the line. It's their ability to go home and feed their families. If you can recognize that, and if you can understand that's something, that it's not just about you, that it's about feeding people, because that's what you have as the ability as a storyteller, as a screenwriter. You have the ability to feed people. And if you make it a conversation of how you can help them, you might find more success than demanding that they must help you. I think that don't be negative with producers. Producers are very much enabling of you, and a good producer, the right producer, will fight to the death to make your thing, because they believe in it as much as you do. And believe me, it's a case of finding that person. It's a case of maybe finding that person and becoming that person, but more than often it is about finding that person if you don't have that within yourself. And Gavin's right, you have to be honest to yourself. This is something, if you want to do it, it's because you have an overriding need to do it. And yeah, I wish everyone luck over here, but I know you guys got this. I mean, you're here, you're talking to us right now. You all have stories to tell. So you got to get out there and make those stories happen. That's your responsibility as the originator of the story, because no one's going to fight for your film as hard as you are. And I think, remember, that's the case. Fight for the film, do what it needs to make that thing last longer than you ever will. And the films, there'll be people who come on board to help you make that. I know everyone's got to go. I just wanted to end on that little bit of a positive note. Don't hate the producers. Try work with them as much as possible, but know your power, know where you stand, know what you believe in, and the right producer will definitely join you on that journey. Thank you, guys. Everyone, thank you again. Thanks for all the questions and answers and the comments and queries. We're definitely going to have it again. We're going to ensure that every so often, we have this kind of thing. But definitely next week, we were going to talk. About part of structure, which is theme. But I think in this particular case, people want to know about the NFVF and funding. Okay, we'll definitely bring it through. Once again, if you're not part of the mailing list, if you want someone to be part of this thing, if you want to share this with someone and to be engaging with it, put your emails. I know if you've received an email from me, we have your email, but if you just jumped on board because someone told you to do it, put your email right now. I will add you to the mailing list. Thanks.
Yeah, it will be 2 weeks. That was a slip of the tongue, 2 weeks. And we'll see, maybe NFVF is next time, maybe something else, because untold original stories is another topic that came, I think, from here. I think it would be very worth tackling, but
okay, yeah,
figure it out.
That's definitely something, untold original stories. So we have NFVF, untold original stories, and something else, which we'll reveal the next time. But thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for coming through. Really appreciate your time. I really appreciate your effort. And even if you weren't able to ask a question or participate in the conversation today, I hope you come away with something that motivates you to make the next script. Hey, everyone. And Boniseni, you want to say something? One last thing? Oh, no, it's cool. Guys.
All right, thank you. I won't hate my producer. Yay. I'll love them.
That's it right there.
All right.